Hi folks, I'm going to talk to you today about Microsoft Excel. It's not so important that it's Microsoft, but it's the tool we happen to have on our stations here at school. Google makes a spreadsheet application, so does Apple, and they all function primarily the same ways. When it comes to tools that you have to use, some of those tools can get different, certainly based on the maker of the software, but yeah, I'm going to talk about Excel. Okay, so what I've started with is some data here, some plain old numbers, and we're going to identify what these numbers are. And this is not really this is not specific to Excel, but we're just making a data table here. And let's call this, we'll say this is some time data. We'll say it's measured in seconds, and this is some position data measured in centimeters. And I laid this data out the way I did on purpose. What we're going to do later is graph this data, and Excel is always going to want the numbers on the left side of the data table here to be the x-axis data. All right, I do think now there's a way you can just switch that on the fly, but in general, what I always try to do is make sure the stuff on the x-axis goes in the left on the table. Okay. The other thing that you'll notice is if I drag these out and make these columns bigger, which is something you can do, notice how the cursor turns into that double-sided arrow when I get it on the line between the two columns. If I click and drag, I can make the columns as wide or as narrow as I want. When I make them really wide, you can tell that actually the default will look like this. The text data here is justified to the left end of the cell, and the numerical data is justified to the right side of the cell. And that can make reading these kind of ugly, all right, especially if, don't worry about this yet, but if everything's on one sheet and we're not careful about where we justify things, notice that it almost looks like this position data and this stuff go together. So that can be a little tricky. What I recommend is that you center justify everything. All right, that takes away a lot of question about, what numbers go with what column headings. Okay, what else? Yeah, please also notice that, as is appropriate really with any data table, you want to put units in the top of in the heading and not in the cells. All right, especially when you're using a spreadsheet program. If I were to put centimeters here, 48 cm. Adding the text to a number makes it impossible for Excel to recognize the 48 as a number itself. All right, so don't mix text and numbers. All right, next thing we're going to do is plot this data. Okay, and to do that, well, I'm going to select the data I want, click and drag, and then for us it's insert, and notice charts here. The one that we want is this one, called a Scatterplot. There's all our data. I just clicked it. Okay, and notice it even, well, it told me that's position data, which is fine. Now that's kind of the title of this. So I would, if I were you, click, just monkey around there, and this is position as a function of time for a what? For a snail. I don't know. For a cart. A cart. All right, what's this? Get out of there. For a cart. For a cart. Okay, we can put that wherever we want. Right? We can put it down here. Why would you do that? Click and drag. Now over here, I think we can do things like yeah, axes titles, right? We can add all this stuff we want. I'll refresh it. I hit this plus here to add stuff. You can add axes titles. So I would add, this is position in centimeters. This is time in seconds. See ya. Okay, so we've got our points plotted on this graph. You can make it however big you want. You can monkey around with that to suit your tastes. Now, one thing that's very helpful for us, this is a skill that, if data is linear, you certainly should be able to draw a nice line of best fit. But in this case, this is, I don't know how well you can tell, but it's a quadratic. All right, so what you can do, I think the best way to do it I found is to click right on a data point and actually right-click. And notice we want to add a trend line. Gives you lots of options. Do you want a linear one? Do you want an exponential one? All you guys' favorite word. This is actually a polynomial. It's a second order polynomial, which is code word for quadratic. The second order means it goes up to, we've got a something times x to the 0 plus something times x to the 1 plus something times x to the 2, or x squared. All right. So yes, we want a quadratic, and look at how lovely that curve fits. Now, what I didn't do, let me go back here. Again, click right on a data point, or maybe there I just double-click to the line itself. We also would like to display that equation. We'd like to see the equation of that line right on there. Okay, here's the equation of that quadratic curve. All right, I can probably change just double-click on all this stuff. Change the font, change the size, whatever you want. Yep, there's the equation of the line. Good. Okay. So that's super short way to figure out, or a super short way of how you plot some data. Okay. Now, what you might want to do, what we will want to do, is use this data to find some other stuff. Okay. And in particular, what we want to do is actually figure out what the average speed of this object was during any interval. And what I mean is, we'd like to find the average speed during this interval, and say the average speed during this interval. So over this amount of time, how far did it go, right? Over this same amount of time, how far did it go? And we can use Excel to do that if we allow it to do some fairly simple calculations. All right, and so what we're going to do is run you through how to make a calculation, and then how to make that calculation sort of repeat a bunch of times. All right, we've got a bunch of data here, so we can do by hand 16 different calculations, or we can do it once and just tell Excel to repeat that over and over again. And so what I want to be able to do is say, like, for the first interval here, what I'd like to know is the average speed. All right, and so what I'm going to do is say this: if I want average speed, right, in centimeters per second. Notice our cell is too small, so I will click and drag so I can get it all in there. I'm also going to take this entire column, by clicking the E at the very top, and then say everything in that column is going to be center justified. Center justified. All right. And so what we can do here is say, during this first second, the average speed is really how far it went, which is, let me do this. How far it went is the change in position. Okay. Now, what I'm doing that you didn't see, let me erase. There's a couple ways you can do it. You can say, I'm putting this parentheses in with a keyboard. I can click the cells I want. This, click, minus with a keyboard. This, click, parentheses with a keyboard. All right, and then divided by with a keyboard. Again, parentheses. This minus that. Yeah? Nice thing is it shows you what cells are what. Well, enter. Let's see what we get. Well, we get 3. So we've done this once, this calculation once, and what we could do again is say, okay, now the average speed at this time is, let's see, well, again, it's equal to. You always, when you want any spreadsheet program to calculate something, you have to start with an equal sign. All right, it tells the cell, all right, you're calculating this cell, the value of the cell is equal to the following, right? We could do, all right, it's change in position. So that minus. Now I can also just click around with the keyboard if I want. So yep, get to that cell and then divide by parentheses this minus that. Right? Enter. Okay. I could type it in all again. Well, that's a bit of a pain. All right, so what you can do really simply, the nice thing about this is that writing this equation doesn't necessarily tell this cell to use, cell C3 and D3 and C4 and D4. It says use the cells that are 2 to the left and the ones that are 1 row up and 2 to the left. Use those cells in general. So what we can say is, okay, watch, copy. I did that with a Control C, but you can copy, and then let's just do it down here and paste. What is this? How does this work? Paste. Fine. Now, if we notice, I just double-click that. Look at that. It used the same general rule. Use the 2 cells to the left and the 2 cells to the left that are above that. Okay? So we can copy that anywhere we want. Or we can do, again, a copy, but I just do for copy Control C, and I can do it and paste it Control V in all those at once. Or, I'll do that again. Right, we can either copy and paste in all of those, paste, right, or, whoops, well, I can just copy this one. We can copy Control C, paste Control V, or, this is my favorite, here's the cell. Notice this little, that little square in the bottom right corner, mouse over it, it becomes that little filled in dark cross from the white cross. Grab there, click, and drag. Booyah. All right, so now we have a bunch of different average speed data. Okay, and what I'm going to do now is I'd like to make a new graph where we plot this average speed data. All right, and so what I'm going to do is select the data that I want to plot. So it's click drag. Now I don't want the stuff in the middle, but I want this stuff. So that's a, now if you did a shift click drag, that would take everything. But I don't want everything, so I'm going to click drag, and I'm going to do a control click drag. For Apple, it might be a command or whatever that button is. So now I have the data I want. Again, we go data. No, we go insert. We go charts. We go scatter. And looky there. Surprise of surprises. We get a linear graph. All right, and notice, this shows I just happen to make a set of data that works out perfectly. Your experimental data will not work out this perfectly. But notice that this quadratic data for position and time shows speed or velocity in data time that increases by the same amount, 6 centimeters per second, every second. Right? That shows a nice constant acceleration. Yep, that's what this graph shows here. Of course, you can go through. I just right-clicked on one of those buttons, not buttons, one of those data points. Right-click on a data point, add trend line, and this is clearly linear. So, yep. Right? We probably want to display the equation. Oh, good. There it is. Okay. Now, there's a little shift here. What's odd is that, well, we're sort of calculating the average speed during the first second, but we're saying that it's at 1 second. So that means that's why this graph is shifted a little bit. It really should start at an initial velocity of 0, but let's not worry too much about that. Okay, that's just a trickier thing to try to handle with the data, but no big deal. So again, you can make multiple columns, each with new data in it. You just have to tell Excel how you want it to calculate each cell, and then you can copy that calculation in as many, over as many cells as you'd like. Okay, and where we certainly like you to be able to draw graphs by hand and calculate slopes and all, You're never in a million years going to do that from the day you leave college, at least, and probably the day you leave high school on. All right, but I've made a ton of graphs, and not just because I'm a teacher, but when I was a professional, ton of graphs in Excel. All right, so it's obviously a nice, clean way to be able to make a nice product and share it, and show that you know how to analyze some data. All right, I'm just going to get rid of these ugly things. These ugly things here. Okay, so that's a very brief tutorial in a couple of things with Excel. Let's remember, let's kind of refresh. One, we always want X data on the left-hand side of the column, or left-hand side of the table. Now, I'm going to actually show you that I think if we right-click here and maybe format, nah, it's not that, but if we were to like maybe right-click here or double-click here, I think there's a way that you can like transpose what goes where. Yeah, there's so many different places to click and all that. Format the plot area. Nope, that's the same thing I tried a minute ago. But there's ways that I think you could just switch the position of what's what. But I don't recommend doing that. I recommend just setting up your data table in such a way that the data you're going to put on your x-axis goes on the left of the thing you want on the y-axis. All right, so that's one thing. The second thing is, of course, you want to, anytime you're going to make a graph, just make sure you click and drag to select the data you want to graph. All right, when the columns of data are adjacent to each other, it's easy, click and drag the whole thing. But in the case where we want to plot here speed versus time, remember we did a click and drag this stuff, and this is a hold down control, click and drag the other stuff. All right, that allows you to select some and not all. Okay. The other thing that I didn't mention is notice that we put data in columns. We don't put data in rows. That's just, in general, I think, sort of the basics of how you present data. The other way to do it is time in seconds, and then 0, 1, 2, 3. That would be putting data in rows. In general, sort of yuck. All right, I would, I don't know if it's the right way, but it's certainly personal preference. Put your data in columns. All right. If you want to be a little, you want to arrange a little bit, you can do things like put borders around everything. Borders around everything. You could, let's see. I'm just going to right-click. You can do all this stuff. Format cells. One thing I like to be able to do is in alignment. Yeah, wrap text. That'll allow us to, if we want, put units on the bottom. So that can maybe make our data table a little bit tighter like that. But those are all, just little formatting things. You can change the color of a certain group of cells. Oh, I also like to have things, this is again, completely personal preference and just formatting stuff. I like to center justify everything. That's just me. So if these rows get taller, we still just center justify the numbers. You know what I'm saying? This one I'd like to be a little bigger. Okay, so a couple of little tools that you're going to start when we can. We're going to use to do our analysis. Okay, not every time, but there are certainly times when I'd like you to be able to do it. And one of them is with the lab that we'll do with carts rolling down tracks with ticker tapes attached to them. Okay, people? I give you the wonder of Microsoft Excel. Maybe a little. Yeah, that's better. See you guys.